Number 1.
I have been absolutely terrified of aliens, specifically the Greys, since I was about 4 years old. I was never exposed to any sort of media or stories that included those type of aliens, so I have no idea where the fear came from. My family had several stories that featured UFOs, but I wasn't told those until I was in my early teens. When my mother was a child, she and the rest of her family were followed by a bright light on the highway that, after several miles of following them, shot straight into the sky and disappeared. My grandfather actually got it on video. I have had one encounter, and I don't talk about it often. But when I was about 7, I went downstairs in the middle of the night to grab a book. I happened to glance out our sliding glass door and saw what appeared to be a large white face with the typical huge vacant black eyes peering through the curtains, about 6 feet off the ground. Needless to say, I ran upstairs and jumped in bed with my parents. 25 years later, I consider myself a skeptic, but I have no explanation for what I saw. I certainly don't want to experience it ever again.
Number 2.
I was passing a window on an overcast night. I noticed a star and became curious because I realized this was the only star on this overcast night sky. I watched and called my roommate over to observe this with me. The light was completely still, so we concluded that it wasn't a plane. Then, the light started to become very bright, and then it would dim. It did this for a few minutes, then it shifted from its position in the sky. Left, then to the right, then back to the left. It did this so quickly and effortlessly. My roommate started to freak out and grabbed her phone, which had a flashing light bright feature on it. She flashed it at the light for a second and then stopped. The light became 3D as it continued to change its luminosity. As it moved closer to us, my roommate took away her phone and ran from the window. I continued to watch and observed it shift again in the sky. Finally, it became dim again. Then it zoomed away, like something in a cartoon. I didn't sleep that night.
Number 3.
When I was pregnant with my son, my husband went out of town for work one night. Our bedroom had one very high, small, round window on the wall above our bed. This experience was very brief, but I had an extremely vivid dream, I hope, of being on a type of obstetricianist table with my feet in stirrups and an insanely bright light shining right on me. There was darkness all around me. I woke up actually screaming, as though I had been awoken by a bright spotlight from the window. I felt I'd been somewhere else. Crazy pregnancy dream? I don't know. I never had any others close to being as real as this. It was 2+ years ago, and the memory of it is still crystal clear.
Number 4.
About 7 years ago, I went to Las Vegas for my brother's wedding. I was flying in by myself and was lucky enough to have a window seat. I was looking out the window as we got closer. We had just gotten to the edge of the strip when I saw a small aircraft fly underneath us. It had a dark blue, half-moon shape on the front, and the back kind of reminded me of a torpedo. I craned my neck to see as it was underneath us, and the half-moon part of it spiraled and closed around the torpedo part. It was pretty small, smaller than a car I would guess. I realized that there are a lot of military exercises that go on in the desert. but not right in the airspace of commercial airplanes. When I got to the hotel, I told my parents right away, and they asked me if I had a few drinks on the plane. No one ever takes me seriously when I tell the story, but I know what I saw.
Number 5.
My grandma and grandpa got divorced when my dad was a kid and never spoke to each other. Both claimed to have been abducted by aliens when they were in their 20s. The story they told was exactly the same in every detail. They were once driving through Nevada at precisely 9 p.m. and bam! It's 6 in the morning, just like that. It was like the world stood still while they just traveled through time. They both say it was the strangest, most unexplainable experience, and could never figure out what really happened. The craziest thing is when I was younger, my grandma was always saying she's going to get abducted, and she was always too afraid to be alone. She also used to say that the aliens did something to her, and that she was going to die. I always assumed she had lost her mind, but she did die last year, without explanation.
Number 6.
This was in the middle of nowhere, Washington. I'm lying in a large field with 8 friends, stargazing and just hanging out after a long day of work. We're all seeing the average occasional shooting star and enjoying ourselves. Randomly, one of my friends and I sat bolt upright, for no apparent reason, facing towards a thick wooded area. Above the tree line, a large bright green light appeared suddenly. We watched it for about 15 seconds. Then it exploded, even brighter, shot away from us, and dove toward the ground at an insane speed. It left a trail, and as it dropped, we saw a ring appear around it. We tried to get the others to look, but once they did, there was nothing there. We tried to convince them of what we had seen, but they called us crazy and brushed it off. Why no one else noticed the brightness of the light or the flash, I don't know. But my friend and I are still amazed, confused, and slightly freaked out about what we saw.
Number 7.
I started noticing a bright light in the sky that had a red tint to it near my parents' house. It was in a different spot each night, and much closer than a star or a planet would be. A few days later, 2 objects came out of nowhere and met each other in the sky. Then another came, and another. They were making motions only military planes would be able to achieve, I think. They danced around for what seemed like an hour. I called other people in the neighborhood to go outside and look. They all witnessed it. At the end, the aircraft sped off in opposite directions. It was later confirmed that no military planes were in the area.
Number 8.
It was December 21st, 2010, about 9:30 p.m., and me and my friend Nicole were driving around stalling, waiting for my other friends to go sledding. We went to drive around the reservoir in New Britain, which is just creepy in itself. There are no lights, curvy roads, and trees everywhere. When we got on the road, the reservoir was to our left, and just above the tree line was a huge light moving along with us as we kept going forward. The road makes a whole circle, so as we were turning the corner, I opened up my sunroof to look because we had thought it was a helicopter looking for someone or something. The light moved above us, and when we looked up, it was a chunky black disc with red lights all over it. The weirdest part is that there was absolutely no sound whatsoever. Needless to say, I practically shit my pants and have never driven so fast around that reservoir in my life. I now refuse to drive out there if it's dark.
Number 9.
About 10 years ago, my dad was driving us home to Alberta from Manitoba. We were somewhere in Saskatchewan, the flattest of land you can find. And it was about 2 or 3 a.m. when, all of a sudden, a huge bright white light zipped right beside us. And as fast as we saw it, it was gone. It lit up the whole night sky as if it were the afternoon. We swore it must have been a meteor, but we searched forever, and there was no stories about it, and nothing ever came up. And for how fast and bright it was, I'm sure it would have left a massive crater somewhere in Western Canada. So now I truly believe it was a UFO, either beaming lights down or zipping past us across the Saskatchewan. So eerie.
Number 10.
There's this couple who lives in Reno. They're like my grandparents. The lady is very esoteric. So, one time we were in their house and I was bored, so I decided to explore. I found this one room, filled with drawings of weird owl people, similar to the Close Encounters of the Third Kind type. Then the lady found me in that room and told me all about how she spoke to aliens in the woods near her house. I couldn't sleep for the whole time I was there.
Number 11.
When I was 5 or 6, on a warm night in Southern California, I was staring out the window as I was trying to fall asleep. At this age, Murrieta was not the highly populated area it is today. It was filled with open fields of chaparral. Any chance of falling asleep vanished when I saw a flying saucer flying above the large open field in front of my house. I immediately jumped out of bed and crouched under my window. I still kick myself to this day for not alerting my parents, but I was awake far past my bedtime, and I was afraid of getting in trouble. To my horror, over the course of a couple of minutes, the flying saucer lowered itself out of view to the chaparral ground. After that, I saw no more of the UFO. I laid in bed for hours, scared, before I was able to fall asleep. An interesting fact I would like to note is that the Murrieta is near the far end of Camp Pendleton, a Marine base. This either means it was a military craft, or the military had to have known about this UFO via radar. There is just no way it would have been undetected that close to a military base. No way.
Number 12.
Extraterrestrial beings are out there. I haven't told anyone this, not even my closest friends who know everything about me, but I truly believe they contacted me through my sleep. It happened earlier this school year. It was sometime in the early morning, around 2 or 3 a.m., when I got this strange sense that I was being watched. And just like from a movie, it seemed like I was looking at myself sleeping. That's when I noticed the two beings on the side of my bed. I felt my hand raise and start going towards them, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Right before I touched them, I woke up drenched in sweat and breathing very hard. I thought it was all in my head, until I noticed my cup of pens on the floor, and my blinds swaying as if someone had just moved them.
When I was in 2nd grade, back in the late 90s, I was having a sleepover with my best friend, who still is my best friend and can vouch for the story. We were in the living room that faced the back side of my house, which was set nearly in the middle of nowhere atop a small, heavily wooded mountain in upstate New York. In the middle of watching some movie on VHS, one of us spots a giant glowing orb, about the size of a small house, hovering above the tree line. So, being a freaked out little 7-year-old, I run into the other living room where my parents were watching TV, and I told them there was something crazy going on with the moon, and they had to see it. They brushed us off and told us to go back to watching the movie. We tried, but the glowing orb was just too big and too weird to ignore, so we ran back to my parents and told them they had to go look at it. Finally, my mom convinced my dad to go take a look, and when they did, my mom got this very confused look on her face and said to my dad, "Bill, go get your coat on. I think that's a UFO, and you have to check it out." So my dad geared up and went outside while my mom bundled us up to follow. Good idea, right? Take a couple 7-year-olds out to potentially be abducted? Anyway, my dad disappears into the woods on a path that leads into a large Tuscany-style mansion about a half a mile away, where our cool neighbor lived by himself at the time. My dad comes back, thank God, a few minutes later and tells us to come along to see what was going on. Long story short, DMX was filming a music video at my neighbor's mansion, and the giant glowing house-sized orb was what they used on set to make it look like it was daytime. We hung out for a bit, had some of DMX's food, and saw him run through the woods with a bunch of dogs. Don't ask me what video it was because I can't seem to find it anywhere. But basically, what we thought were aliens was really DMX, the rapper.